Hello viewers and welcome to yet another Warhammer 40,000 Conquest video production. My name is Mitch and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today I'm pleased to present a triumvirate of new Orc faction card spoilers from our upcoming Planetfall Cycle War Pack, Boundless Hate. These cards were recently unveiled during the 18th episode of the Tactical Squad podcast, so a tremendous thanks to not just Fantasy Flight Games for providing our community with this intriguing new trio of previews, but thanks also to the cast and crew of the Tactical Squad as well for serving up the images I'll be using in this video today. But with that covered, here's an introduction to and my initial impressions of our freshest batch of new Orc cards. First up, in one of two brand new army units, we have the Frontline Ard Boyz. For a cost of 4, they possess 2 command icons, have an attack value of 2, as well as 5 printed hit points. They have the Warrior and Boys traits, and the text, "This unit must be declared as a defender if able." So, this unit is strikingly similar to the Tau faction Fire Warrior Elite, as well as the recently unveiled Eldar Dire Avenger Exarch, because insofar as traditional unit versus unit combat is concerned, each of these 3 army units all interfere with your opponent's ability to optimize their order of target removal. If you have several low HP or otherwise vulnerable units present at a planet, presumably which have yet to attack, instead of your adversary being able to target those exposed units individually and dispatch them through traditional pinpoint attacks, when the frontline Ard Boyz are present, your opponent will be left with no other option but to target this reasonably high HP unit instead. Plus, I think it's critically important to consider that this unit need not be ready for you to benefit from its passive printed ability. Whether or not you possess the initiative, at the first available opportunity, you can simply use your frontline Ard Boyz to attack, and they generally do so at the value of 2. Then, instead of your opponent being able to declare one of your unexhausted units as the recipient of an opportunistic, potentially fatal attack, this new Orc unit can change the mathematics of combat dramatically in your favor by hopefully not only redirecting attack after attack to itself, but in doing so also ideally manage to endure a significant amount of damage. Often enough during combat, when both players have a reasonable number of available units at a planet, your presently ready units will proceed to kill currently ready enemy units, and in general, each time a ready unit dies, that player's controller, him or herself, is deprived of their chance to make one additional attack, or trigger some additional ability. Our current meta presently favors playing a large volume of relatively low hit point, albeit high statistical value units, and therefore not only can it be likely that the frontline Ard Boyz may well endure multiple attacks, but each and every unit you don't lose because your opponent cannot directly attack your other present, generally still ready units can each end up making a considerable difference. Although the frontline Ard Boyz do nothing to block or otherwise negate damage dealt to any of your other units through direct sources from card effects, and our new Orc army unit is by no means immune to enemy abilities or events itself, it could regardless prove a very reasonable means of redirecting enemy firepower that would, under normal circumstances, be focused toward your Evil Sun's War Bikers or similar other high attack value, relatively low HP units. And considering the frontline Ard Boyz are common, not loyal, they could also potentially be used to fantastic effect outside of playing an Orc faction warlord. For instance, they could provide an impeccable opportunity to experiment with the inclusion of Alpha Legion Infiltrator in Chaos faction decks, as they could interject themselves between incoming enemy fire and your own 4 attack value, albeit 1 hit point, Chaos faction army units, and the very same thing could be said about Possessed, the 9 attack value, 4 hit point Chaos Demon Elite. Or perhaps if you're instead interested in testing them out alongside the Astra Militarum, they'd be superb in protecting your cheap, albeit usually fragile Tallarn Raiders. Plus, if you end up deploying the Frontline Ard Boyz alongside Colonel Strachan, our original Astra Militarum faction warlord, though this unit is far from inexpensive, it may nevertheless provide some significant impetus to stray from our recently released Broderick War, because as a warrior trait unit, they not only attack for 3 when positioned at the same planet as our just mentioned first AM warlord, but they also enable and benefit from a considerable bit of Astra Militarum faction synergy to boot. Plus, especially considering that Strachan himself needs to be involved in combat in order to confer his 1 attack value bonus to all present warriors and soldiers, the more that you can do to prevent your enemy from being able to target him directly, the better. And considering additionally that due to his presence, each and every standing warrior and soldier at that planet will be hitting harder than normal, then it becomes all the more desirable that you keep each of those units also alive for as long as is reasonably possible. And if you possess 1 or more copies of Steel Legion Chimera, also positioned at that same planet, that combo could work out perfectly, as your enemies will have no option but to target this unit with their attacks, which stands to derive full benefit from the damage mitigating ability of those aforementioned AM faction vehicle units. Similarly, the Frontline Ard Boyz' fantastic defensive effect could also prove to be of tremendous benefit in conjunction with the outgoing damage amplification effect from the original Chaos faction warlord, Zarather High Sorcerer. But by no means am I suggesting that these units are inadvisable to play within the Orc faction itself. Granted, this unit does cost 4 resources, but it does help somewhat to shore up the lackluster greenskin command presence because of its 2 associated icons. Plus, both existing Orc warlords benefit considerably from this unit's presence at a planet. Not only do the Ard Boyz gain obvious benefit from receipt of the Brutal keyword conferred by Nozdreg, as this 5 HP unit could itself attack for a possible 6, and it's almost guaranteed to incur a large amount of damage, but they also happen to help you in that they prevent Nozdreg himself from being targeted directly with attacks. And the longer you can keep our original Orc warlord hale, then the longer each and every other unit at that planet stands to derive benefit from his Brutal keyword as well. And instead, with old Zogwart, for each and every additional attack you declare with your warlord, you stand to generate 1 additional Snotlings token. And if you can use the Ard Boyz to keep the pressure off of Zogwart, if you can endure additional combat rounds during which your warlord is able to remain present at a planet thanks to the attack redirection ability of this unit, then that too, in generating additional tokens, could prove absolutely fantastic. Plus, it's definitely worth noting that not only should you attempt to keep this unit alive for as long as possible with shields, but should this unit end up nearly destroyed, you can then use Custom Field Generator in order to prevent and redirect the damage that would have otherwise dealt the killing blow, proceeding to redistribute that now indirect damage among your other hopefully essentially unwounded or otherwise unmolested Orc faction units. And frankly, you probably want to use each and every trick available to you in order to keep these units around at a planet for as long as is possible. But even if they end up at some point swept into your HQ, when they they subsequently show up at a planet again exhausted alongside your warlord, you nevertheless do continue to derive significant benefit from their always active ability, especially if you happen to play the enormously powerful event Battlecry, considering that provides such a monumental persistent attack bonus if the frontline Ard Boyz stubbornly stick to a planet and your opponent is essentially unable to easily or at all remove them, even if you only manage to spare one or two other units from destruction or death prior to their opportunity to attack. Even that small alteration to the mathematics of a given combat can nevertheless serve to provide a game-changing difference. So this unit is undoubtedly expensive, but it most definitely comes alongside considerable benefit. Granted, it is easily enough removed from a key battle by a large number of available problematic enemy card effects, and will remain susceptible to abilities such as Archon's Terror and Clavek's War Leader without being able to derive any protective benefits from the eventual release of our upcoming neutral event Backlash. But regardless, this strikes me as an affordable enough unit that, whether it's absorbing card effects so that your opponent can remove it from a planet, or ideally successfully enduring multiple attacks, whichever the case may be, it seems like the frontline Ard Boyz will regardless provide a considerable, perhaps somewhat situational benefit. Plus, as one final note, if you can prevent your weak, vulnerable units from taking small, incidental instances of damage because all of it ends up piled upon this unit instead, then, should you choose to deploy a copy or more of DACA throughout the course of a game, then you could stand to wipe your enemy from the face of the Traxxas sector, while the majority of your own units are left standing. So, whereas the frontline Ard Boyz themselves are durable, but really provide their greatest benefit in protecting your other present units from attacks, the second to be spoiled Orc Faction army unit is a behemoth essentially reliant on no other unit than itself. For the cost of 5 resources, we have the Ramshackle Trukk. It has 2 command icons, a loyal icon, an attack value of a staggering 7, but a pool of no more than a paltry 3 hit points. It has the vehicle and elite traits and reads no war gear attachments. It has the Goes Fasta specialization. While your opponent has the initiative, this unit gets plus 4 HP. So at first glance, this is a discouragingly fragile unit relative to its cost, but it isn't exactly trivial to dispatch through a variety of different direct damage dealing card effects, as an opponent would need, for instance, to invest 3 resources into a Tzeentch's Firestorm just to threaten to kill off this unit, and of course, you're readily able to shield against that kind of single target removal effect. Granted, as is any current elite, this expensive unit is susceptible to pinpoint routing and exhausting style card effects, anything along the lines of Inquisitorial Fortress, Eldorath Starbane, and of course, Clavek's War Leader. But, as we've also had spoiled our soon-to-be upcoming neutral event Backlash, that card effect will allow you to shore up that elite intrinsic weakness in a very big way, hopefully in the very near future. But when this unit really shines is when you don't possess the initiative, specifically when you aren't the player holding the initiative token, or otherwise, if you do have the initiative token, but this unit is fighting at a planet where the enemy warlord is and your warlord is not. If that happens to be the case, then instead of a 7 attack, 3 hit point unit, this elite instantly stands to transform into a 7 HP monstrosity. And although those bonus hit points will cease to exist the very instant you no longer possess initiative, that could still give this unit sufficient staying power to radically influence the outcome of a given conflict. Not only does an attack value of 7 threaten threaten to bloody or destroy almost any current printed warlord under nearly any circumstance, but in doing so it therefore puts a monumental amount of pressure upon your opponent to either expend their most valuable events and attachments as shield cards, or use up or otherwise deplete their reserves of valuable attack prevention effects. Or, perhaps most simply and of greatest potential benefit to you, they may simply opt to have their warlord dodge the presence of this unit entirely, because outside of scarcely few available devious card effects, each which provides a simple solution to the Ramshackle Trukk, this unit can be enormously stubborn and isn't really that expensive considering the body attached to that cost. Plus, as a loyal orc unit, alongside Nozdreg, our new vehicle becomes absolutely absurd, because if that's the case, well, your opponent won't necessarily want to attack such a potentially high HP unit directly, they will not be able to endure such a threatening presence at a planet for long, and especially if you can use damage prevention / redistribution style effects, such as custom field generator to your advantage, this could provide you with an incredible opportunity to severely punish an opponent so bold as to challenge your deployment of this elite unit. If you can manage to load up 6 possible damage tokens onto the truck, then with the assistance of Nozdreg's granted brutal keyword, it can potentially attack for an incredible 13 without the assistance of any other card effect, and even a warlord so formidable as is Barzul the Hatebound, on his 11 HP bloodied side, will absolutely quail under the pressure of such a possibly devastating attack. And outside of the discard of his 3 shield value signature attachment, if he happens to have been entirely hail, then otherwise a single individual attack from this augmented vehicle could end up quite handily winning you the game, if you do or don't possess initiative. And if you don't, a toughness of 7 can be monumentally difficult to chew through. Plus, if your opponent does decide and manage to destroy your Ramshackle Trukk while your warlord is present, perhaps for fear of incurring such a devastatingly high-value attack, you could, as a response, play Made to Fight for the mere cost of 2 resources in order to deal out an enormous 7 printed points of damage to any enemy non-warlord unit sitting at that same planet. Further, you could also play Fall Back at the cost of 1 lone resource after your truck is destroyed, and in doing so, immediately return it to your HQ. And additionally, should you be so fortunate as to have a copy of Teleportapad in play, if you also happen to have been fighting at the first planet specifically, then you could immediately return your unit to combat, and again threaten to deal out still additional enormous heaps of damage, albeit 1 swing at a time. So, clearly the possibilities intrinsic to this unit appear quite frankly absurd, and while its 2 printed command icons may not do much to win you additional command struggles, they will at least do something, and though the 6 attack, 6 hit point Goth Knob is an alternative Orc Elite option, which does happen to be more reliably durable, and that its stats are always consistent, not reliant upon initiative, and still further, it has the additional benefit of also being able to equip war gear, it isn't necessarily quite so formidable as our Ramshackle Trukk when deployed to a planet by its lonesome, should you end up encountering the enemy initiative-stealing warlord. And though that 1 attack value discrepancy between the Goth Knob and our new vehicle unit may not appear overly significant upon first glance, all the same it is a very significant threshold and can make a world of difference when you're able to deal out the killing blow to units, such as an entirely hail enemy warlord, in just 1 combat round, as opposed to a possible 2. Plus, though we won't see the release release of Gorzod, our third upcoming Orc faction warlord until Deadly Salvage, the third war pack of the Planetfall cycle, it's regardless worth noting that despite not having the truck's cost reduced by 1 by that warlord, as it's neither an Astra Militarum nor Space Marines faction vehicle, it will nevertheless stand to receive an additional +1 attack and HP bonus from his signature support, the Customization Station, whereas our Goff Knob Elite would not. So clearly this is a monumentally powerful unit, and one I'm quite excited to see played. Just remember that, should it at some point end up with 3 or more points of damage, whether it remains wounded at the end of a battle after you trigger a planet's battle ability, or if instead it stays damaged at some point during the HQ phase, when the actual initiative token exchanges hands, the moment you do end up losing initiative, this potentially temporarily ephemeral 7 HP unit will be immediately destroyed. So, for that reason, the Ramshackle Trukk is perhaps at its very best when deployed to Iridial, which could serve to banish away any and all damage incurred prior to the ultimate conclusion of a victorious combat, and clearly you'll want to use shield cards and or custom field generator as much as is possible to attempt to ensure that this unit only ever ends up with no more than 2 points of damage upon it. So, whereas your opponent could simply end up wounding this unit and then retreat from a planet, resulting in your truck being destroyed and discarded perhaps in between battles, your adversary may well forego triggering a battle ability in attempt to do so, and possibly could end up allowing you to be the player to not just trigger that potentially beneficial ability, but also to perhaps add a planet to your victory display as well. So, dependent upon ally, you could also use a Dozer Blade in attempt to augment this unit's low printed HP, or you could instead opt to stick with our original Goff Knob. But whereas this unit does flaunt a reasonable 2 command icons, our other Orc Elite option most definitely does not. And if you're the kind of player who enjoys experimentation with combo-centric, albeit perhaps competitively suboptimal decks, this odd-costed 5 resources required unit does seem to be yet another step in the direction of making the indirect damage-dealing support or Kalanda ever so slightly more viable. But last and most certainly not least, our third of these new cards is an Orc faction event, and that fact alone is fantastically intriguing, because our general community consensus seems to be that so far, our greenskin factions thus far seen instances of such one-time use card effects are generally too expensive and or offer simply too underwhelming an effect to merit their cost. So, without further ado, we have Rok Bombardment. For the cost of 2 resources, this is a 2 shield icon card and also has a loyal icon. It has the tactic trait and combat action. Target a planet where a battle is taking place. Until the end of the battle, after each unit at the targeted planet resolves an attack, deal 1 damage to it. If the targeted planet is a material icon planet, red, this effect only deals damage to enemy units instead. So, first and foremost, this is a 2 shield icon card, so even if you don't think this may make a considerable difference in each and every situation, it's always worth at least something in a deck, considering just how significant it is because of that intrinsic defensive effect. And regardless as to whether this event hits a metaphorical home run or ultimately serves to falter, you'll generally always want to include at least some 2 shield value cards in any given deck. So, Rok Bombardment therefore always merits at least some consideration among similar competing cards, such as Battlecry, Daka Daka Daka, and Squigify. But for its intended effect, when a battle erupts at a planet, you can invest invest 2 resources into this event and alter the remainder of that combat. From that point on, each time during that battle that a unit resolves an attack, it afterwards suffers 1 point of damage. So I think it's very important to note that while this event will threaten to kill off all units with 1 remaining HP, those same susceptible units won't actually incur damage until they may manage to deal attack damage themselves successfully. For instance, though your opponent may possess 10 Chimera tokens at a planet, each and every one of them will be able to resolve its attack, potentially killing off some of your units prior to their taking damage as the result of this card effect. All the same, this could be fantastic in a battle of attrition. Note that Orc units are in general relatively hardy, with reasonably high HP values relative to the units of other factions, and therefore you might be less likely than is your opposition to be destroyed as the result of this effect. But just as this event damages your enemy, it also threatens to kill off your own units, and although the damage dealt by this card effect is entirely shieldable because it isn't applied until after an attack is resolved, this doesn't exactly synergize well with the Orc ubiquitous brutal keyword, unless your damaged unit ends up living long enough in order to launch a second attack, something which generally won't occur until a second or subsequent combat round. But this event will continue to function until a battle does eventually conclude, and it could end up working out particularly favorably for you if your enemy has a large number of low HP units, whereas you, yourself, have perhaps no more than an elite, a few moderate HP units, and or your warlord. If you're outputting few attacks yourself, while your opponent instead executes many, the discrepancy in damage distributed to you and your opponent could prove quickly significant, though this loyal event does seem to synergize poorly with old Zogwart, given the relative fragility of his 1 HP Snotlings tokens. Plus, you'll have to be very cautious when employing Nozdreg's Flash Gits under the influence of Rok Bombardment, because they'll not only take damage after attacking and after readying themselves, but then they also stand to take additional damage upon their attacking a second time. But it's also important to note that you can wait to trigger your Rok Bombardment event until after your first attack, if you're the player with initiative, and if your units are sufficiently durable, a little bit of damage here and there may actually end up helping you in the long term because of the brutal keyword, and this effect could undoubtedly assist you in detonating one of your own copies of Big Shoota Battle Wagon, which your opponent may have otherwise avoided attacking entirely. And additionally, considering that attacking with a unit is never optional unless that unit happens to be a retreat-interested warlord, this event could also provide a stellar means of killing off any present enemy economy units, such as recon drones, rogue traders, and or void pirates. But, though I've yet to touch on one of the most important aspects of this event, provided that you can bring your fight to a red material icon possessing planet, then this event becomes dramatically more powerful, as it's suddenly only the enemy units which end up suffering damage. And should you ever be so fortunate as to play multiple consecutive copies of this event, with or without a pre-combat copy of Daka 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 to considerably soften up your opposition, then this could radically alter the outcome of any given conflict. Though it perhaps isn't too often to occur, just imagine the possibilities if you show up at the game-deciding planet and happen to play 2 or more back-to-back copies of this event. If that battle is taking place at a red icon possessing planet, then your units take no damage whatsoever after attacking, but each and every time an enemy unit attacks, for the entire duration of that battle, it will afterwards suffer 2 or 3 separate instances of 1 damage, each of which which must be shielded against individually, and that poses an enormous threat to established meta staples such as Honored Librarian. And considering that this effect resolves after a unit is exhausted, even Blood Angels veterans become susceptible to this event, and considering further that this is damage dealt out from a card effect specifically, it's also a superb answer to an enemy copy of Rickety War Buggy, though it may pose an equivalent threat to your own. So, by no means is this a card meant for each and every situation, but note that we are going to be seeing at least some development of synergy with the Orc faction pursuing red material type icon planets in the future, as evidenced by the partially spoiled Scrap Naba army unit, which gains a +2 resource bonus when positioned upon a red material icon possessing planet. So perhaps you use that Orc economy unit to lure in your opponent, and then you use this event in order to successfully spring a trap. Then, the longer you can prolong combat, be it through custom field generator, shielding, our aforediscussed frontline Ard Boyz, or any number of other effects, then the amount of damage you could deal out to the enemy as a result of one or more copies of this event could be absolutely monumental. So be sure to let me know in the comments what your own opinion is of our latest exciting new Orc spoilers. But now that we've covered our upcoming Boundless Hate Warpack cards, I'll just conclude this video by saying thank you once again to Fantasy Flight Games for providing our community with this trio of previews, and of course a well-deserved thanks to each and every member of the Tactical Squad podcast as well for providing me with the images I used in this video today. Again, be sure to share your personal opinion and sentiments regarding these upcoming cards in the comments, and as always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button and consider subscribing to my channel if you've not done so already, or if you are already subscribed, you're always encouraged to share this content, as the more viewers there are that happen upon these videos, the more individuals stand to be exposed to Conquest, they may like what they see, someday join our community, and of course, all together, we continue to send the message to Fantasy Flight Games to continue to support this fantastic product. If at any point you'd like to get in touch with me, I would encourage you to do so through Facebook or on Twitter, and if you ever feel so inclined to help support the Hive Tyrant, I would be both honored and humbled were you to donate to my Patreon. But once again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, be sure to check back in again soon for much more Conquest LCG content to come.